The Murder Shelf Book Club contains disturbing content related to real-life crimes. Listener discretion is advised.
Before the killings, I was a carefree kid, oblivious to the dangers lurking beyond my safe, middle-class suburban neighborhood. After learning that 2 girls had been murdered while they were out doing the same kinds of things I liked to do, ride their bikes, I was scared. Playing in the woods now gave me the creeps. A couple of years later, I occasionally walked to school by myself when I missed the bus or couldn't get a ride. My route required me to walk past a wooded gulch, which always made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My heart would race. Lindsey Wade, In My DNA, My Career Investigating Your Worst Nightmares. Well, welcome to the Murder Shelf Book Club podcast. I am your host, Jill. Summer is going by fast. I am smelling pumpkin spice in the air. Oh, come on. You are too. Admit it. This is episode 99. Monsters Are Real. Part 1 of In My DNA, My Career Investigating Your Worst Nightmares by retired Tacoma, Washington detective, Lindsey Wade. I was so lucky, as were some of you. Lindsey Wade came to our meetup at CrimeCon 2024 in Nashville. It was great to meet her, to chat, talk about her book, the cases that she was involved with. My admiration runs deep. Now, this book is somewhat different as it focuses on a law enforcement career versus a particular perpetrator's crime and victims. Even so, there are very significant overarching cases that run through the whole story. I cannot give In My DNA any higher praise because it has the 4 R's. It is raw, it is real, reflective, and respectful. We get to see how events from childhood manifest later in the life of adults, plus how cases are solved, the 1 step forward and 2 steps back process, and the innovative brainstorming to finally identify a suspect. So a little about Lindsey. Lindsey Jackson Wade grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and joined the Tacoma Police Dept. I believe she views her employment as a calling, not necessarily a job. A woman who trusts her gut, she literally witnesses the significant developments in the science of DNA testing, rocking investigation, and heating up cold cases. On retiring, she went to work for the New York State Attorney General's office as a senior investigator assigned to the Sexual Assault Kit Initiative. Yes, finally testing all those untested rape kits going back decades. As a subject matter expert on using DNA to solve cold cases, sex crimes, and child abduction response, she's a speaker at law enforcement conferences all over the country. In My DNA was published in 2023, comes in at 205 pages, and I give it 5 stars out of 5. Now, this is our first episode, so with book clubs come deliciousness. Well, it turns out that Lindsey Wade loves chocolate-covered almonds, so I found this recipe on Chelsea's HighMildMits.com. Dark chocolate nut bars. Oh dear God, this is delightful. This is a 2-step process. Neither is difficult. You mix chopped and sliced almonds, cashews, honey or maple syrup, coconut oil, and vanilla with some microwaving, and you make little nut clusters. Then you melt dark chocolate chips in a microwave and spread the chocolate in a thin, even layer on parchment paper. Cover the chocolate with dried cranberries and then the nut clusters. Let it cool, and you break it into about 16 pieces of bark. I'd probably make 2 sheets for my book club because I'm going to want some for myself for later. This is truly as easy as it sounds, and it tastes amazing. Now, dark chocolate goes amazingly well with red wine. And one of my favorites from Naked Wines is the Yakiyoshi Reserve Clarksburg Cabernet Sauvignon 2020. Bold at the nose, you taste the cases. That is the fruity black currant with lush black cherries, juicy black plum flavors, followed by vanilla and a sweet oak spice. Smooth with firm tannins, this has a delightfully long finish. This is an amazing experience sipping, whether it's from your crystal goblet or your red solo cup. Now, I expected this to be like $20, $25. No. If you are a Naked Wines angel, it is $14.99. So, with all this deliciousness, bon appetit murder bookies, and onward to In My DNA. Lindsey Wade begins her book with a childhood memory. Something had woken her up, and she'd wet the bed. Going to wake up her mom, she wanted reassurance. Mom cleaned her up, but was too weary to change sheets at this ungodly hour, so Lindsey was led to the guest room and tucked in. Uncertain, Lindsey really wanted her own room, not the big, musty guest room with the creepy koala bear in the corner. As with most girls, her room was her salvation. She loved her record collection, which included Michael Jackson's Thriller, Prince, and Rick Springfield. You gotta love the 80s. Music was important to the Jacksons, something Lindsey shared with her dad, but now she pulled up the comforter to her chin. Beginning to drift off, she opened her eyes and could just see the outline of a figure at the foot of her bed. A man watching her, standing over her. Frozen, she must have gawked and must have squeaked out a sound because he left. Summing up her courage, she slipped out of bed and peering down the hallway, the coast was clear, she sprinted to her parents' room. Shaking her dad awake, she said, quote, Dad, there's a man in my room. There was a man in my room, end quote. Thinking she was having a nightmare, nevertheless, he got up, searching the house, finding no one. Lindsey was gobsmacked. Where had he gone? Disturbed, she would spend the rest of her night sleeping in bed with her mom and her dad. Still upset the next morning, her dad found a pocket knife on a chair, and it didn't belong to them. Now, unknown to Lindsey, Dad had actually noticed a few weird things happening lately. Cash in the kitchen had gone missing, and a laundry room window screen was missing. Not long after, a teenage boy was caught breaking in when he thought their house was empty. Dad, quote, put the fear of God into the boy, which included threats of serious bodily injury, end quote, and he never came back. His parents later explained that he'd run away and they hadn't seen him in weeks. Well, the Jackson family now moved to University Place, a Tacoma suburb. A quiet town with a good school district, they were the only interracial family in their neighborhood. Lindsey was born to her white single mom. Her biological father, a black man, wasn't interested in making a family. When Lindsey was 2, her mom met Jack Jackson, a biracial man himself. They married, and Jack adopted Lindsey, with her saying he was the best dad ever. When a white boy harassed Lindsey, calling her Michael Jackson, Dad defended his girl, having some harsh words with the boy's father. While this kid never bothered her again, run-ins with racism would sadly continue. An 11-year-old tomboy, Lindsey was interested in softball, so her dad taught her how to throw and hit. Off the field, she pushed her baby brother around in a laundry basket as MTV played the latest hits. Carefree, tossing hoops in the driveway, Lindsey first learned about the 2 little girls who had been killed riding bikes in North Tacoma parks. 12-year-old Michella Welch and her sisters went to the park. Realizing they'd forgotten their lunch, Michella returned home to get them and disappeared on March 26, 1986. Michella Yvonne Welch, who loved piano and the violin, who always managed to boss around her little sisters, was gone. Later that night, Michella's body was located. She had been sexually assaulted and murdered, her throat slit. Many tips came into the Tacoma Police Department. A 13-year-old boy said he saw an older man watching the sisters, and a composite sketch was drawn up. This prompted another man to call in, saying he'd seen a guy who looked just like the composite sketch in another park, Point Defiance Park, where this guy jogged. If he ever saw the man again, he would try to get his license plate. The public was terribly fearful, and Lindsey writes, quote, "Up until that point, I didn't know that evil existed or that monsters were real," end quote. Point Defiance Park was where Lindsey spent wonderful summer days at the YMCA camp, doing crafts and collecting seashells. Michella Welch had been dead for about 5 months. On August 4th, 1986, 13-year-old Jennifer Bastian jumped on her 18-speed bike, training for an upcoming bike race at the San Juan Islands. Her family was composed of Mom, Patty, Dad, Ralph, and older sister, Teresa. Jenny, as she was known, was petite with a blonde pixie-cut hair, blue eyes, and a huge spirit. 15-year-old Teresa was working as a YMCA camp counselor at Point Defiance that day. When her riding partner canceled, wanting to train anyway and use this bountiful energy that she had, Jenny got permission to go ride alone. Around 2:30 p.m., she left a note with a little heart saying she'd be back by 6:30 p.m. But Jenny failed to show up. Ralph and some neighbors went out to look for her, but she was nowhere along her usual bike route. Tacoma police were called at around 8:30 p.m. Jennifer Bastian, who was looking forward to starting 8th grade in September, was missing. As he took the report, Officer David Wiltfong wondered if this was connected to the earlier murder of Michella Welch. Had the killer struck again? Around 5 a.m., bloodhounds were given items with Jenny's scent. Going out to trace her route, they did pick up on her scent around 5 Mile Drive, but no Jennifer was found. Closed to the public, a massive search of the park was conducted by over 250 searchers, with missing persons flyers plastered everywhere. Police also collected eyewitness accounts, which helped to create a timeline. A park employee had seen Jennifer riding her bike near the Owens Beach Park entrance around 2:30, maybe 3 o'clock p.m. 3 boys who knew Jennifer reported seeing her riding, with a white male adult riding a huffy 10-speed close behind her, slowing and speeding up as she did. A sketch was developed, but no one was identified. At 4:20 p.m., a woman saw a girl in a blue or purple swimsuit and shorts on a bike just past Owen Beach, and this matched what Jenny was wearing. 2 young men having a beer at the Delco Passage viewpoint spoke to a girl matching Jennifer's description. She said she was training for an upcoming race, and they noted that she was wearing 2 silver bracelets around her wrist. All right, known fact. Jennifer was wearing 3 silver bracelets on that day, a gift from her dad. At 5:30 and at 5:45, men reported seeing a girl on a bike near 5 Mile Drive, the latter saying she was by the zoo. And from these very consistent reports, we know that Jennifer made it to the park and rode her bike along 5 Mile Drive and then vanished. 24 days since she went missing, August 28th, in a wooded area off 5 Mile Drive, in a well-hidden hollow, the body of a young female was found. Hidden and difficult to access, this dump site had likely been prepared ahead of time. Jennifer Bastian's body had been found. Thurston County Deputy Coroner Dr. Mark Papworth stated that this perpetrator was organized, likely engaging in some long-held fantasy. From the positioning of her body, it appears that Jennifer had been posed and was sexually assaulted. Decomposition was severe, but a thin ligature was found around her neck. Thus, the cause of death was asphyxia. With years of practice, the Green River Task Force was called in to assist Tacoma Police detectives in processing the crime scene. Now you can hear more about them and the Green River serial killer in episodes 59 to 62 on the book She Married the Green River Serial Killer by Penny Wood. I got into a deep dive in that one. Well, with the discovery of Jennifer's body, the resulting panic that gripped the Tacoma area was intense. In 5 months, 2 young girls had been murdered, and given the similarities, police began to wonder, was there a serial killer on the loose again? Now, this is the Northwest United States, which did seem to be a breeding ground back then. Parents kept their kids inside, and the era of free-range parenting was over. Lindsey gives voice to this, and I opened with her reflections on this shattering of innocence. She and her friends were afraid to go on bike rides or walk alone, and she pictured some lunatic hiding in trees waiting to grab her. Quote, "It's hard for me to think back to a time in my childhood when the mystery surrounding Michella and Jennifer wasn't in the backdrop. It was just something that everyone knew about. My mom likened it to her teenage years when the Ted killer was on the loose." End quote. In high school, Lindsey came across Anne Rule's book, The Stranger Beside Me, with her both engrossed and horrified by the story. But what appealed was how the detective's investigation unfolded. Quote, "After absorbing every detail of the book, I knew I wanted to be a detective just like Bob Keppel." End quote. Lindsey also provides a quick review of Ted Bundy's crimes from 1974 to 1978 in Washington, Oregon, California, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and Florida. Bundy would confess to killing at least 30 young women. His first confirmed victim was Linda Healy, kidnapped out of her basement apartment. Then he would troll college campuses, bars, ski resorts, leaving a trail of missing dead women behind him. After 2 escapes from jail, he would flee to Florida, going on a spree killing and brutalizing the women from Chi Omega sorority. And then he murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. It was a bizarre coincidence that Bundy grew up in Tacoma, and Lindsey's mom knew Bundy's mom from work. I did cover Ted Bundy in my trilogy on The Phantom Prince by Elizabeth Kendall, episodes 9, 10, and 11, if you haven't listened to them and you're interested. Empathizing with what Bundy's victims may have suffered, Lindsey writes about the penchant for women to be polite and accommodating. Quote, "Historically, women have ignored their instincts, alerting them to danger because they don't want to overreact or, God forbid, offend someone. Offering to help a stranger in need or walking to my car alone after dark were things I would have done, and I knew I didn't want to end up like his victims." End quote. Okay, I have had these very thoughts. I grew up in New Jersey, and during a family vacation to Florida when I was 14, I was a typical antsy teenager, so I told my parents that I was going to go for a short beach walk. I left our hotel room and went to the beach. And it was dusky in Fort Lauderdale, and the temperature perfect. Walking, the beach was empty, probably because it was close to dinner time. I was walking along and picking up shells, and I saw out of the corner of my eye a man, kind of shadowing me at a distance, closer to the hotel than I was. And I kept going, but slowly turned, doubling back, and still picking up shells, doing nothing to indicate that I had seen him. And he turned and was following, moving slowly, now diagonal towards me as if to intercept me. Heart hammering, I knew I was in trouble. I pretended to be oblivious, picking up another shell and then another. And back then, I ran track. So when I got close enough to the opening that led to the car garage, I broke into a sprint, running furiously inside, getting into the elevator and pounded on the closed door button. And I heard footsteps, and I was relieved when that door shut and the elevator started moving upward. Did I tell my parents? No, I did not, because I didn't want to cause a problem and be a problem. This could have gone very, very poorly. Fortunately, I had dreams of becoming a cop myself at this time, and I had very strong situational awareness, and it saved me. I have no doubt that that man meant me harm. In retrospect, I wish I had notified the hotel and my parents because he was left out there hunting. But honestly, I did all right for a 14-year-old. And I really think this is the first time I have shared this story with anyone. So I understand what Lindsey is saying. Make this no longer a thing. Make noise, shout, scream. Tell everybody. Oh, okay. Graduating high school, Lindsey enrolled at the Tacoma Community College, where two life-altering events occurred. First, meeting Tacoma Police Sergeant Barbara Justice, very appropriately named. In a class, she agreed to have Lindsey do an internship with her. A female officer who had begun her career when women and law enforcement didn't exactly mix, she greatly influenced the officer Lindsey would become. Going to the shooting range to shoot a real cop gun was also valuable. And tagging along on her shifts a few nights a week also gave her a new perspective. And it confirmed that, yes, she really did want a law enforcement career. Barbara Justice would go on and be her mentor and her friend, and would prove to be a valued sounding board. The second thing that happened was when she took a class at TCC from Sam Holden, a police detective who happened to be the hiring officer with Tacoma PD. A born storyteller, he wove his teaching around the tales he would spin, his slow southern drawl inviting. For example, he told of getting child molesters to open up to him by reinforcing the suspect's delusions, and many confessed while Sam Holden appeared to understand their perversions. Lindsey would learn firsthand that this technique worked really well. Lindsey enrolled at TCC's Reserve Police Academy, absorbing the classroom lectures, and they practiced defensive tactics, zooming it up in police cars on the emergency vehicle operations course, developing an important skill. She was born to do this. Now, knowing we need a sense of crime scene setting, Lindsey now describes Tacoma at the time. Washington's port city on the Puget Sound, it was 30 miles away from Seattle, with beautiful beaches and a waterfront promenade. But like many urban centers, Tacoma had its fair share of drugs, gangs, and crimes. Completing her associate's degree, Lindsey Jackson applied to the Tacoma Police Dept, scored well on the written exam, and began the lengthy process towards hiring. During the oral portion, a skeptical male officer asked her if she had ever been in a fight. So he's clearly wondering if Lindsey would be able to handle herself on these dark urban streets. Well, yes, she had. A bar fight in Mexico. Now, such questioning would likely not happen today. Males and female candidates get the same kinds of questions, and that's a good thing. Well, as the application process was moving along, Lindsey began to work on her bachelor's degree. But she was finally offered her dream job, so she dropped out and joined the Tacoma Police Dept. Not a quitter, she would continue her education at night, graduating with her degree in law and justice with a minor in psychology from Central Washington University. Graduating from the police academy, Lindsey was one of 6 women, the only one of color, in a class of 29 recruits. And the next 5 years, she would work the night shift on patrol in Tacoma's hilltop neighborhood, nicknamed The Hill. 22 years old, she was often mistaken for a high school-aged police explorer. Her first dead body. About 3 months on the job, call came in about a woman who had died on her couch several days before. Severely bloated, her skin was a deep shade of purple and black. The unmistakable, greasy stench was overwhelming. The fire department lent her a respirator, a blessing, while inside the house processing the scene. Moving the corpse, she split open, and the intensity of the stench is described as, quote, practically 3-dimensional, end quote. From this day forth, the smell of fast food fried chicken would never, ever again work for Lindsey. It invoked that rotting body stench. So, wow, there's strange consequences, right? Over the years, Lindsey Jackson would have a number of partners, and the bond that develops is very deep, knowing that they trust each other with their lives. By 1997, the pace had slowed somewhat, even as open-air drug deals and gang violence continued. A normal shift would see a few domestic dispute calls, some drug activity complaints, a few fights, and possibly a shooting or a stabbing. That's slowed down, by the way. She shares the story of a man suspected of beating his girlfriend and fleeing. Climbing up a tree, his hand was in his pocket, and he was resisting commands to show us your hands now. Her gun drawn, this guy had already been violent, and Lindsey was a split second away from shooting him when he pulled out his hand and revealed a hairbrush. Oh my God, a police officer hesitating a fraction of a second can result in death, likely hers or her partner's. And if she had actually shot this guy, it would have been pure hell explaining why she shot a guy armed with a hairbrush. Strong suggestion, people. Just do what the cop says. Just do what she says. You can sort things out later with everybody alive. And no, cops do not need to explain to you why you are being stopped. They do not. Cooperate and stay alive. Another time, Lindsey was searching a car, and she pricked her finger on a dirty hypodermic needle. Standard needle stick protocol required a heavy-duty regimen of medication, also known as the AIDS cocktail, and this is mandatory. It made her violently ill. Lesson learned, quote, use caution when searching people and vehicles. Look before you touch, dummy, end quote. Then there was the time when some guy was screaming, indicating a possible domestic dispute. Going to investigate, attempting to figure out what was what, she and her partner tried to put on handcuffs as he pulled away. Wrestling commenced, trying to get control of this strong, wiry guy, and he tried to get Lindsey's gun. Quote, shit, he's trying to kill me, end quote. Bouncing off the hood of a car, rolling onto the asphalt, the guy was on her partner on top of him, and this guy's eyes had gone totally blank. A bad sign. Grabbing his balls, she gave them a twist with no response. As I read, I thought what Lindsey thought, quote, what the fuck is this guy on, end quote. The wrestling match resumed, one hand on her still holstered gun, and they teamed up, getting this idiot under control. It was one of the scariest nights of her life. She knew if he'd gotten to the gun, both she and her partner would be dead. After 5 years of patrol, Lindsey was ready to do more, to solve cases, to interrogate suspects, to put the puzzle pieces together. She wanted to be a detective. Prepping for the written exam and the oral board, she took flashcards on her honeymoon, marrying Ed, a fellow cop. Passing these hoops, she was put on an eligibility list. And during the next year, Lindsey was transferred to narcotics, learning how to write and serve search warrants, conduct surveillance, and the nuances of investigation. In August 2003, she was called into Chief Don Ramsdale's office, where Lindsey was handed her detective badge, number 435, her dream come true. But this was also a surprise to her because there was another candidate who was ranked ahead of her on the list. Later, Lindsey would learn that there was grousing, that she had been promoted in front of the white male candidate only because she was a female minority. So you really think that that was the only reason she was promoted? Well, hardly. By the way, it is perfectly acceptable to choose from the top 3 on a civil service list, and you choose based on the individual expertise of the candidates. Now, as I mentioned, race had plagued Lindsey while growing up. One boy she was dating was ordered to stop seeing her because she was half black. Now, her boyfriend did not dump her, but she was never invited over for dinner. That's just terrible. Lindsey writes, quote, "The realization that someone would dislike me or believe I wasn't good enough based solely on the color of my skin was a painful reality check, and here it was coming up again in my professional life. While I knew my work spoke for itself, it still pissed me off that someone I worked with would make that accusation." End quote. Well, I also think part of it was being embarrassed at being stepped over for a girl, which is sexism, and it's just as bad. But the new Detective Wade began doing background checks, investigating auto theft, which, by the way, is not as much fun as the video game. When asked if she wanted to move into sex crimes, she jumped at the chance. Her first sex crime case was unusual. The victim was a walk-in. Most sexual assault victims call the police or go to the hospital to report it. In this case, in the Hill, she had been raped the previous evening by an unknown male. After the interview, she was sent to the hospital for a sexual assault examination. Lindsey worked the case for months, unable to identify a suspect. The crime lab generated a DNA profile, but it didn't match anyone. 12 years later, up in Alaska, DNA was collected in an arrest, and it matched this unknown DNA case from 2004. A long wait, but justice came. Child abuse is simply an awful, unconscionable crime. Lindsey's first came from a therapist's report when a now adult client revealed sexual abuse that had occurred years earlier when she was a child. The investigation was expected to be fairly simple and straightforward, paraphrasing now, but it devolved into a convoluted, multi-generational, interfamily child molestation investigation of ritualistic child abuse. And, frustratingly, after months of investigating, there was not enough evidence to charge anyone. Lindsey writes, "Welcome to sex crimes." She learned that delving into adult and child sex crimes is the most difficult to investigate and prosecute. By the time these crimes were reported, there was usually zero to scant physical evidence and no witnesses. Nevertheless, giving it her all is required, and she was intensely committed to seek justice for these victims. A few months later, one of the old guys in the office shared a file that he had in his drawer containing stacks of photographs, and he began to tell Lindsey about the 1986 murder of Jennifer Bastian, that very case that terrified her as a kid. Her full attention was fixed on gruesome photos, which revealed exactly what had happened to this little girl. And she wanted to cry, her heart breaking for this child's last moments. But she couldn't cry. It would be a sign of weakness. It would indicate that she was a lightweight and unable to deal with the job. adopting a clinical guise is necessary. Lindsey knew victimology and that studying the victims, the crime scenes, and the photographs was crucial. But she would never forget what she had seen in those photos. Child abuse, serial rapists, sexual predators invading homes where people should be safe, assaulting and murdering changed Lindsey as a detective, a woman, as a wife, and a mother. Quote, "These cases permeated the thick skin I had developed over the years, and the vivid details are now permanently intertwined with my own DNA." End quote. Not long after, Lindsey was assigned to an assault case, 16-year-old Lisa Delgado. At the Lakewood Town Center, a white man had offered her a ride in his tan pickup truck, and she gratefully accepted. He asked her how old she was, with her responding 15. He asked if she was working, and she didn't understand what he meant. Oh, that doesn't bode well. When they approached where she was going at the outskirts of the hill, the man pulled a large knife, ordering her to take off her pants. Crying, Lisa refused, begging him not to hurt her. Still driving, he threatened to hurt her if she didn't take her pants off. Quote, "I need to fuck some young pussy," end quote. Lisa tried to get out of the truck, and to her horror, she realized there was no door handle on the passenger side. She frantically rolled down the window, trying to climb out, but he grabbed her by the leg and she kicked at him several times as he stabbed her in the lower back before she squeezed out the window, escaping. Flagging down a passing car, Lisa was taken to the hospital by the driver. Fortunately, she wasn't badly injured. A police officer came in to take the report, and the investigation was launched, but the suspect wasn't identified. She described a heavy-set white male in his 30s with a round face and bulgy eyes. The missing door handle, combined with the violence Lisa was subjected to, was discerning. There were probably many other victims out there. Working with Detective Gene Miller, he and Lindsey identified several unsolved rapes of sex workers that had occurred over the last few years. A Pierce County Sheriff deputy knew of a similar case, and he had seen the notice that Lindsey had sent out. He provided the name of a potential suspect in Lisa's case. In addition, Lindsey had found a field information report from June 22, 2004, involving a man named Delbert Paul Michelson. The report read, quote, "Had prostitute, toy gun, 12-inch busher knife and tape in vehicle, stopped by Puyallup tribal police, similar to serial rapist," end quote. Tribal refers to Native American tribal law enforcement, which is very common in Washington and other Western states. Michelson was stopped in an area known for prostitution and drugs, but finding no warrants, the tribal officer released him. Now this pricked Lindsey's curiosity. This man is riding around with sex workers in his car with a rape kit. Doing research, Lindsey saw that Delbert Michelson drove a tan 1996 Toyota pickup. Running a background check, Michelson fit the description of the man Lisa Delgado had given. He'd also been arrested in 1993 for rape first degree and unlawful imprisonment. Getting a copy of this report, Lindsey realized this assault on a 16-year-old girl, Gina Smith, sounded very familiar. So back in 1993, at 2:32 a.m., Tacoma PD responded to reports of a woman screaming. They found a half-naked, hysterical young girl, Gina Smith, dress pulled down to her waist, breasts exposed, with a black cord tied around her wrist. In the streets, a very sweaty man stood right behind her, Delbert Michelson. Placed in separate patrol cars, each told their stories. Gina admitted that Michelson had picked her up and offered her $40 for sex. She agreed and went to his apartment. Afterwards, she tried to leave, but Michelson wanted more, pulling a gun and pointing it at her head. He tied her wrists behind her back with a cord from her dress, blindfolded her with a green shirt, and forced her into the living room where she was forced to perform oral sex. At some point, Gina pushed Michelson into a glass coffee table, which shattered, allowing her to run out the front door screaming. Pursuing her, trying to get her back inside, he offered to return her clothes. Refusing, Gina demanded her belongings back, and he threw her clothes onto the streets just as the police showed up. Michelson's story. He had picked up the girl and he brought her back to his place, but had no idea she wanted him to pay for sex. They had sex, which she wanted rough. Then she freaked out, and he admitted he had a gun, but he had never taken it out. All right, that is called a load of crap. But let's follow the evidence and it'll take you where you are. Outside, police officers found a torn green t-shirt. Inside, they found shattered glass from the coffee table and a .22 caliber pistol on the bathroom sink next to Gina's earrings. In the bedroom, they found a condom wrapper on the floor next to a .22 caliber pistol magazine with 6 rounds. Haha. So, following the evidence, where are we? Michelson was arrested for rape in the first degree, plus unlawful imprisonment, getting booked into the Pierce County Jail. Gina refused medical treatment because she was pregnant and she would go see her own doctor. The rape charge never stuck, however, and the case was dismissed. So taking all of this in, Lindsey concluded that Michelson was a good suspect for the Lisa Delgado assault. But was there enough evidence? November 6, 2004, she and Detective Jean Miller went to speak with Lisa, who was at the Reman Hall Juvenile Detention Center. She said the man was fat, green-eyed, he wore a hat, and his teeth looked fake. He drove a gold Toyota pickup with a bench seat, missing the interior door handle. The knife was a large kitchen knife with a black handle and silver screws. Later, Jean told Lindsey that he had had a similar case 6 months earlier. May 9th, 2004, at 2 a.m. Awful lot going on at 2 a.m., isn't there? Police officers responded to a report of a collision on North 5th Street. Officers arrived to find 39-year-old Sadie Jones partially naked and in a state of shock. Her right hand and arm were bleeding, and on her wrist was masking tape acting as a pseudo-handcuff. Sadie was a sex worker and only in her first week. Around 2 a.m., a man approached her in a gold pickup, wanting a date. Getting into the truck, he asked her if they were going to fuck for free. Well, Sadie refused. The man stopped, pulling a 12-inch knife on her from his side door, threatening her that she'd be hurt if she didn't do what he said. Sadie tried to jump out, realizing the inside door panel was gone. The door was covered with plastic and duct tape. Trapped, Sadie agreed to do whatever he wanted. He ordered her to undress, pulling a roll of masking tape, the knife in his lap as he bound her hands behind her back. Seeing the knife on his lap, she grabbed for it, and they fought over it with the blade digging into her arm and hand. The man dragged Sadie out of the driver's side door, and she grabbed her purse, righting herself, and the guy tried to ram her with his truck. She leapt onto the hood and skidded onto the street. Detective Miller was assigned to the Sadie Jones case. He tried to identify the pickup truck driver, but latent prints came back negative. And then, given Sadie's transient lifestyle, Jean couldn't locate her to interview her. By now, Jean and Lindsey believed that the Lisa Delgado and Sadie Jones cases were linked. Deep diving, Sadie was located living out of state. In March 2005, a local detective took a DNA sample and showed Sadie a photo lineup, with Sadie identifying Delbert Michelson as her assailant. Now, with this confirmation, Lindsey knew there were other cases and began searching the law enforcement database for similarities, spending hours figuring out just the right keywords to elicit a positive result. Finally, Lindsey did find a 2002 case in Lakewood, a town nearby, which shared some of the case features. December 16, 2004. Jean Miller met with Lisa Delgado, where now she identified Delbert Michelson as the man who had stabbed her. Now, when Lindsey called Lakewood Detective Mike Zarrow, she told him she had probable cause to arrest Michelson for assault first degree for the attack on Lisa. The Puyallup Tribal Police had stopped Michelson last May with a sex worker. A search found a rape kit, pistol, knife, and BB gun. Now, his vehicle matched the descriptions by the victim from his Lakewood case. And significantly, Delbert Michelson's middle name was Paul, the name the suspect used during the Lakewood assault. Zarrow then compared a booking photo of Michelson with the composite sketch and saw strong similarities. 11 p.m. the same day, Delbert Paul Michelson was arrested by the Tacoma Police Dept. He was taken to the Criminal Investigations Division office for an interview, his truck impounded, and Detective Zarrow was invited to join Lindsey and Detective Brad Graham when he was interviewed. Michelson admitted picking up sex workers in Tacoma, preferring white females since he'd had a bad experience with a black woman in the early 1990s. He also admitted going by his middle name, Paul. He had owned his gold Toyota pickup for the last 5 years. Michelson claimed he suffered from blackouts, from drinking, and a mental health disorder. And no, he had never pulled a gun or a knife on anyone as he began to sweat. His knife was for camping, and the BB gun was a Halloween prop. Had he ever gotten into a fight with any of the sex workers he picked up? Oh, well, there was that incident last October. A girl had freaked out on him after seeing the broken door handle, but he opened the door and let her out. When told one of the victims said he'd cut her with a knife, Michelson grew quiet, then responded that no, that hadn't happened. Well, had he been drinking and didn't recall? Quote, I don't remember any incidents that gone that far, end quote. Well, he was told if he couldn't remember, they'd have to go with the victim's version of events, as torrential sweat began to flow from him. Now he said, quote, if it's the gal I'm thinking of, she pulled a penknife and stabbed me, and I grabbed the knife from under my seat. I may have hit her as she left, end quote. So now he remembers pulling a knife in an altercation. Well, why had she pulled a penknife on him? Well, he repeated she'd freaked out over the missing door handle. I can't imagine why that would frighten anybody. He added that she'd gotten angry when he didn't want to date her, which caused her to stab him in the chest. Oh, yeah, right. So how many times had he stabbed her? Well, he admitted that he hadn't known he'd actually hurt her, and he was locked up. The next day, a search warrant was enacted for Michelson's trailer and truck. 6 rolls of varying kinds of tape were found in the truck, thin white rope, a black-handled butcher knife under the driver's seat, that's all known as a rape kit, and as expected, the interior passenger side door handle was missing. The whole door would be removed and placed in evidence. The butcher knife was sent out for DNA testing, which proved negative. The trailer was disgusting, covered with trash and debris, the kitchen with moldy piles upon piles of garbage, old food containers, and discarded bottles of alcohol. How to search through all this and not catch something or be bitten by God knows what? Well, innovative. One detective rigged a coffee table as a platform and a golf club turned search probe so they could move items around at a distance. I just can't even believe this. As all this was being processed, an additional similar case was uncovered from May 26, 2000. 30-year-old Karen Brower reported that she had been out at a bar and was walking home. A white man in a small silver blue pickup offered her a ride. Accepting, he stopped at a convenience store, going inside briefly. Left in the truck, Karen looked up and noted 3 strips of duct tape about 3 feet long stuck to the roof. That, by the way, is called a red mountain. And that means you get out and you run. All right, I am not blaming Karen because it just didn't blip on her radar. But I do want to illustrate some clues that you can pick up on. Well, she didn't get out and back on the road. They were not driving where Karen had asked to go. Asking him about this, the man said that he would turn around, but instead pulled down an isolated road, stopping, and pulled out a 9 to 10-inch knife from under his seat. If she didn't do what he said, he'd hurt her. With the tape from the roof, he taped her wrists and pushed her onto the floorboard. Now he drove to another spot along the Puyallup River, and he cut the tape, forcing Karen to take off her clothes. Outside the truck, he repeatedly raped her, demeaning her as he did so. Done, he threw her clothes away and put duct tape over her eyes and drove away. Utterly terrified, Karen didn't immediately report the rape. But later, she heard about a similar case on the news and decided to file. No, she had not gone to the hospital for a sexual assault exam. She did take the officers to the location where she was assaulted, and duct tape remained on the ground. Shown a photo montage of suspects, she did not pick anyone out. Now, December 19th, 2004, Lindsey spoke with the original detective investigating Karen's rape, pointing out the similarities with the Michelson cases. This detective found Karen Brower in the Pierce County Jail, and he and Lindsey went to see her, bringing photos of possible suspects. Immediately, she pointed out Dilbert Michelson. That's him. She admitted that she was a prostitute, which is why she didn't immediately report the rape. December 20th, 2004. Detective Zarrow collected the evidence taken in by the Puyallup Tribal Police Department, the BB gun, and the knife, which had a red smear on the blade. Sent to the crime lab for processing, the blood on the blade matched Sadie Jones' DNA. Now Detective Zarrow dug deeper into the police files and found another similar case in Lakewood, November 13th, 2004. Lakewood police were dispatched on a possible abduction call. 2 witnesses saw a yellow pickup in a ditch by the side of the road. A woman was hysterical, running in front of their truck, flagging them down, and they picked her up. She was 33-year-old Tamara Hilliard. So scared to death, she wet her pants. She said a man was trying to kill her. Calling 911, the police arrived shortly thereafter. Tamara had been approached by a white male driving a late 80s or early 90s yellowish-brown pickup. He waved, got out of the truck, and grabbed her by the hair, pulling her into the passenger side of the truck. Inside, he pulled a knife, yelling, "Don't you move, bitch," and it was time for her to die. Then he pushed her out of the pickup. Skidding across the pavement, she got up running, but he rammed her with the truck, hurling her into the ditch next to the road. The man then struck her with a baseball bat, with Tamara playing dead. When he went back to the truck, rifling through God knows what, Tamara took off again, with him trying to run her down again. This time, his truck got stuck in the ditch, with her flagging down the Good Samaritans. By the time the police arrived, the suspect was gone. Now, Detective Zarrow began to try to find Tamara Hilliard, locating her in jail in another state. In 2005, he met with her, showing her a photo lineup, with her positively identifying Dilbert Michelson as the man who had attacked her the previous November. She told him that the passenger door handle didn't work, and he had threatened to kill her. Now, Lindsey was able to zero in on 2 more cases from 2001 with the same familiar ring. However, these women did not go to the hospital for a sexual assault exam, so there was just no physical evidence, and neither one identified Michelson as the perpetrator. In the end, Dilbert Michelson was charged with 14 felony crimes, rape, kidnapping, robbery, and assault. all stemming from the Lisa Delgado, Sadie Jones, Karen Brower, and Tamara Hilliard cases. Michelson pled guilty and was sentenced to 22 years to life in prison. 3 years later, technology had advanced enough that the crime lab matched Michelson's DNA to the duct tape removed from the unsolved 2002 Lakewood rape case. And while he wasn't charged with this crime, it will be a factor if he should ever come up for parole. God forbid. Lindsey reflects that these were challenging cases to investigate, very different from what we see on CSI. Very limited forensic evidence. There was no videos, no fingerprints, no cell phone data, with only DNA tying Michelson to the cases he could be charged with. His modus operandi and vehicle descriptions linked these cases, plus the eyewitness identifications. His admission of stabbing one of the victims also helped. Like too many books we've covered, Delbert Michelson preyed on the most vulnerable in our society. He sought out marginalized women struggling with drug and alcohol addiction, and he selected women who were unlikely to report his crimes, knowing they may not be believed or compromised because they were sex workers. With no fixed addresses or stable communication ability, they were transient, unreliable, missing interviews. The man-hours required to find the victims, convince them that they were believed and that their particular circumstances were irrelevant, was monumental. Lindsey could have just investigated the cases she was assigned to and never looked beyond that. But she knew Delbert Michelson was dangerous and had to be certain he couldn't hurt anyone else. February 2005. Lindsey and Jean Miller were responsible for reinvestigating several sexual assault cases after another detective was transferred. One of these was the kidnapping and rape of 53-year-old Mary Smith that took place in McKinley Park in April 2004. Tacoma police officer Gwen Beverly arrived at the Puyallup Tribal Police Station. Victim Mary Smith was disheveled with sticks and leaves matted to her hair, a sticky residue left across her face and wrists where she had been bound with duct tape. Mary had encountered the suspect when he offered her a ride in a small white car. Back in 2004, East 28th and L was known for drugs and prostitution. Occasionally, Mary worked as a sex worker, but she was not this night. Driving to McKinley Park, she and the suspect walked down a trail to a spot he had selected, where he laid a piece of cloth on the ground and then pulled a knife on her, his voice and demeanor changing in a split second. Cooperate or he'd kill her and bury her right here, and wrapped duct tape around her head, bound her wrists behind her back. Then he brutally raped her. Pulling an item from his backpack, he inflicted terrible pain, and when she struggled, he threatened to use a tree branch on her. After hours of assault, he mumbled incoherently, tossing his belongings from the backpack around the area. He gave pills to Mary, giving her scope to wash them down. When he wasn't looking, she spit them out. Rambling, he said he was recently released from prison and was getting psychological care. His car belonged to his mom. So the guy's got mommy issues on top of everything else, right? Cutting the duct tape off, he tied her with shoelaces, telling her she was lucky he wasn't a Bundy. He wasn't going to kill her. And then he released her. Mary feared reporting the rape because she had engaged in sex work, and she went home. After her roommate saw Mary's state, she was convinced to go to the police. At the scene in the park, officers found Mary's shorts and bra, the cloth he'd laid on the ground, pieces of cut duct tape, shoestrings, and an empty bottle of scope. Taken to the Tacoma General Hospital, a rape kit examination took place. As this was occurring, Officer Beverly went about identifying the pills he'd given Mary, successfully identifying Seroquel, an antipsychotic used to treat schizophrenia, bipolar disorders, and major depression. Searching the sex offender database, the name Donald Schneider popped up, a level 3 violent registered sex offender, which means he has the greatest likelihood of reoffending. Schneider lived less than half mile, 0.8 kilometers, from McKinley Park. Recently jailed for a probation violation, he was receiving mental health treatment and was prescribed Seroquel. What a coincidence. Oh, and his mother owned a small white car. Mary wasn't able to identify Schneider in the photo lineup, but she knew her rapist wore gold-wired framed glasses. Her rape kit was sent out for DNA analysis, and other items tested negative for fingerprints. Lindsey did a background check on Donald Schneider, and he had a lengthy criminal history. 45 years old, 6'2", 240 pounds. His first offense was in 1982 when he kidnapped 14-year-old Jessica Frame. When he approached her, Jessica pulled a pocket knife out trying to protect herself. Schneider charged her, knocked her down, and disarmed her. Beating her, he slammed her head into the pavement as she screamed for help. "Stop fighting or I'll kill you." Dragging her to a grassy area, he raped her. But someone nearby heard Jessica's screams and called 911. Officers arrived, searching the area, and came upon Schneider raping the girl. Quote, "The officers ordered Schneider to freeze, but instead he jumped up and tried to make a run for it. He didn't get far before he tripped over his pants, which had been around his ankles." End quote. What a stupid monster. He would plead guilty to second-degree rape, being sentenced for 10 years. And there were no other sex crimes attributed to Schneider from 1982 until Mary Smith's rape in 2004. Well, Lindsey sought to find out if Mary's rape kit had been tested, calling the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab. Well, it was submitted, but not yet tested. They also recommended submitting the cloth that had been placed under them on the ground. In April 2005, news came that the semen in the rape kit matched one Donald Schneider. A search warrant for Schneider's mother's apartment and her car was obtained. Arrested, Lindsey writes that interviewing Schneider was unpleasant at best. She had arrested many men, but rarely felt intimidated. This man sent chills down the back of her neck, putting her on edge. Schneider denied raping anybody, but he had picked up a hooker and taken her to McKinley Park, where he pretty much did everything, and she liked it rough. But it was consensual, and he paid her $30. Now, keeping track of Mary until the case was completed was difficult given her lifestyle. And in January 2007, Schneider was found guilty and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Thank you very much. Washington's mandatory 2 strikes out law for sex offenses. And that was that, she thought, for Donald Schneider. Wrong. July 2011. Now her former partner, Jean Miller, was working cold cases. And occasionally, Lindsey would work on a few as time permitted. She always looked to see if there were any cases that might be linked to Jennifer Bastian's murder. When reviewing old cold case files, she began by reading the entire case file several times over, with post-it notes plastered throughout. She walked the crime scene to get a feel for the area, matching the crime scene photos to the terrain. She would do an analysis of what, if any, had been tested at the crime lab, relocated witnesses and suspects to determine what else might be done. She had recently cleared a 1995 rape of a 9-year-old girl in Buckley, Washington. September 20th, 1995. Little Emily Pierce was walking to her school bus stop. A yellow car paused and the driver called to her. When she got closer, he seized her, forcing her inside, threatening to kill her if she wasn't quiet. He pulled over, bound her hands behind her back with duct tape, and forced a rag into her mouth, duct taping that too. In the woods, he brutally raped Emily. Afterwards, he warned her to keep quiet, because he'd come back and kill her if she spoke up. Emily managed to get herself to the highway, where a motorist picked her up and drove her to Mary Bridge Children's Hospital in Tacoma. Treated for her injuries, the poor child needed surgery. She was able to help create a composite sketch of the suspect. Reading through the case file, Lindsey felt sick. Now a mother herself, her daughter was 9, the same age as Emily. She noticed that a rape kit had been collected, but had it been maintained? Finding that it had, she reached out to Pierce County Sheriff Cold Case Detective Tim Coble, who agreed to send it for DNA testing. Maybe it would match the DNA from Michella Welch's case. And if it didn't, maybe it would match to another dangerous rapist who needed to be apprehended. February 2012, Detective Coble called. There was a CODIS hit in the Emily Pierce case. The unknown male DNA in her rape kit had matched Donald Victor Schneider. Yep, the same guy. Further, the offender DNA profile from Mary Smith's 2004 rape matched him as well. She rushed into Gene Miller's office, both thunderstruck by this news. With Lindsey recovering from shoulder surgery, Gene and Detective Coble went to Walla Walla State Penitentiary to interview Schneider. He didn't talk, but a fresh DNA sample was collected to confirm the CODIS hit. In 2013, he pled guilty to the rape of a child and received another life in prison without parole sentence. Yes. Working with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Lindsey set out to make a comprehensive timeline of Schneider's activities and his modus operandi. He was ruled out of Jennifer Bastian's murder because he was in jail when it occurred, but 2 other cases sounded strikingly familiar to his MO. July 30th, 2004, 11-year-old Holly Chambers and her mom, Michelle, were out walking around 8 p.m. at night. Suddenly, a man jumped out from behind a hedge saying, "Hello, ladies," as he grabbed Holly and pushed Michelle, a butcher knife in his hand. Mother and daughter fought the knife-wielding man, and Holly was able to break free, running like mad. The man now ran towards his 1980 Datsun pickup, speeding out of the area. Holly and Michelle helped create a composite sketch. When broadcast on TV, a Snohomish County sheriff detective thought it resembled a recently released sex offender. He was arrested and charged, but it resulted in a hung jury. The prosecution was preparing a retrial when Lindsey pulled the Chambers file and was struck by how much the sketch resembled Schneider wearing the same gold-rimmed glasses in his 2005 mugshot. More digging revealed that he owned a blue truck similar to the one described by Holly and Michelle. Schneider also lived in the vicinity of the attack at a time, but there wasn't enough evidence to charge Schneider with the attack on Holly and Michelle. The second case that emerged as she was looking for similarities to the Jennifer Bastian murder occurred on November 25, 1986. 2 14-year-old girls, Amanda Lacey and Roberta Flynn, had gotten off a bus near Pacific Highway in North Tacoma. A man sat in a dark blue Chevy Nova honking his horn as they passed. As the girls came to a brushy area, he jumped out from behind the bushes, grabbing one of the girls by the throat, armed with a knife, and forced both girls into his car. He drove the terrorized girls to McKinley Park. Yes, the same park where Mary Smith was assaulted. And Amanda and Roberta saw that the passenger side door handle had been removed. Yup, just like Dilbert Michelson. Lindsey asked if there's some serial rapist playbook that recommends this or something. At the park, he pulled duct tape from his backpack, taping their hands behind their backs and taping their mouths shut. Moving to a wooded area, he sexually assaulted both of them. Afterwards, he told them to lie on the ground, then go to the Tacoma Dome where someone would help them. They eventually went to a nearby residence where the police were called. Taken to the hospital, a composite sketch was drawn, but no arrest was ever made. I think we can all see the similarities to Schneider's MO. Lindsey examined the crime scene photos, then inquired as to any remaining evidence, but it had all been destroyed. In 1988, even very primitive DNA testing, RFLP, restriction fragment length polymorphism, didn't yet exist in Washington, not until after 1989. Well, she didn't have great news, but she still felt the need to reach out to the victims. She never interviewed Roberta, but she did call Amanda. And introducing herself, she heard Amanda crying, feeling terrible about reopening 25-year-old wounds. But then Lindsey was surprised. Amanda was happy that someone cared, that she hadn't been forgotten. And this was a powerful reminder that what Lindsey did for a living was important and it mattered. Detective Brad Graham joined Lindsey to interview Amanda. She was shown a photo lineup, but after 25 years, she couldn't identify Donald Schneider. In October 2015, Brad and Lindsey were now sitting down with Schneider at Walla Walla. They were there to interview 2 other inmates after DNA had tied them to other rapes, but they figured they'd come by and say hi. Schneider was unexpectedly pleasant once he learned that there were no new charges against him. Lindsey hoped to get him to talk about Amanda Lacey and Roberta Flynn. He admitted that he'd done a lot of bad things, but due to his methamphetamine use, his memory was terrible. He seemed agreeable to talk again, and his mother had passed away, so she'd be spared seeing him on TV again. Murder Bookies, as I wrap up this episode 99, Monsters Are Real, what an aptly titled episode. What is frustratingly clear to me is that work in the sex crimes unit is damn difficult for all the reasons, but you have to keep at it and persevere and seek justice in whatever form it comes for the victims and families. And in our next episode, episode 100, we got here. This is called The Monster Inside. We see Lindsey continue to explore these cases, getting frustrated, getting convictions, and working with DNA results, whether they work for her or do not move the cases forward. So please join me in 2 weeks for episode 100. And our next book. Well, I have a Patreon Zoom coming up at the first Thursday of the month at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, and I will ask them to help me pick one. So stay tuned. I suspect it will be one of the fabulous books from CrimeCon 2024, because I loved meeting so many amazing authors. Always know how much I appreciate the input, because I can't do this without you, and nor do I want to. So thank you for listening, Murder Bookies. I see you as you hear me. Please take a few minutes to leave an awesome review that will help us make new Murder Bookies. Share your thoughts with me at jill@murdershelfbookclub.com. I am on X, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Links are on my blog at www.murdershelfbookclub.com. Written and produced by Jill, all rights reserved. Music, The Pewter Elephant by Blue Dot Sessions.